Once those indictments come in, it's a total different game. Now, what's on the line is your freedom. And based upon the allegations that are being brought against Weisselberg, against Calamari, against the Trump Organization and others, I mean, you're looking at potentially 10 years. And rest assured, the game is not stacked in your favor. And the lawyers will turn around, especially that they're being paid by Trump right now, that, stay the course, like what was told of me, stay the course, stay on message, do what you need to do, right? Don't worry, Donald is there for you. He loves you. He's going to protect you. He'll never let anything bad happen until, of course, he forgets Alan who? Matt who? Michael Cohen who?
Someone who knows a little bit about all of this, that was former Trump attorney and fixer and loyalist Michael Cohen with a bold prediction on what lies ahead for Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg and other business associates of the disgraced, twice impeached ex-president with criminal charges for the Trump org that could come down any moment now. The New York Times is reporting this, quote, lawyers for Donald Trump's family business mounted a last-ditch effort on Monday to fend off criminal charges against the company, meeting with Manhattan prosecutors investigating whether it had awarded valuable benefits to a top executive without paying taxes. The meeting, which lasted less than an hour over a video call, came after the prosecutors warned the Trump org that they were considering indicting the company and its long-serving chief financial officer. Joining our conversation, Neil Katyal, former acting U.S. Solicitor General, Georgetown University law professor, and an MSNBC legal analyst, as well as marketing and branding expert, Donny Deutsch. Neil, I want to show you one more thing Michael Cohen said about how Trump carries on this sort of Houdini-like ability to evade legal and criminal accountability. Let's watch.
Donald Trump's big out is the fact that there are no emails or there are no text messages because he has no email address and he doesn't text message. However, all of the documentation refers back to the boss or to him by name and so on. And yes, it's not a slam dunk since you don't have the emails from his email address since he doesn't have it. But if everything and everybody all acknowledge the same thing, that everything was done at the direction of and for the benefit of Donald J. Trump, including when it comes to the taxes, where I believe that he'll look to throw the accountant and the accounting firm under the bus, right? They all are going to then have to come out and defend themselves, leaving Trump all by himself. And eventually, this is what's going to happen as a direct result of these indictments that are going to be coming out.
So, Neil, my question is, we know from Michael Cohen and others that that's how the business ran. You know, if you read the Mueller report, especially Volume 2, that that's how the White House ran. Is this really going to protect him if his company is charged?
I don't think it will, Nicole. I think Michael Cohen is right to say what he just said. It's harder for Trump to walk away from this and be like, Trump Organization who? I mean, he can do that with Michael who or Alan who or whatever, but this is literally the company that Donald Trump built and that his children run. So it's just a lot harder. So I do expect, just given what we've read in the reporting, that we will see criminal charges brought against the Trump Organization. And I suspect Trump's first move afterwards will be to declare victory and say, oh, I wasn't charged or something like that. But his company was just indicted. And it's a bit like boasting you didn't get a speeding ticket after you got busted for a hit and run or something like that. This is very bad. Yeah. And, it's usual, actually, that you don't charge right away the CEO, the principal. You build your case. So if you think about Enron, for example, Enron wasn't indicted for 2 years. They first indicted Arthur Andersen, then they started indicting mid-level people, and then you work your way up through flipping folks toward the very top. And of course, Ken Lay, the CEO of Enron, was found guilty of 10 counts. So this is a longer process. Whatever this news is in the next day or two is just the start, not the end.
Donny, Michael Cohen obviously now sort of shares his experience of being asked to stay loyal to Trump and then being, in his view, betrayed and having to side with law and justice and prosecutors and investigators. What does he privately think the likelihood is that Alan Weisselberg or Mr. Calamari or either of their sons will do the same?
He thinks there's they will flip. I actually spoke to him today, and he says, look, it's, when they bring the hammer, they bring the hammer. And two things. I agree with Neil, obviously, and every prosecutor that's been on here. This is the first step. They will continue to build a case. But even this step is devastating. It will really destroy the Trump organization in that basically they won't be able to borrow money from banks. They won't be able to do business. You can't have a real estate company not being able to do business with banks. An indicted company, the banks walk away from. So even this move, before they go after Trump personally, is going to devastate him and his company. And then where I think it goes, and Nicole, I introduced this on the show a couple of years ago when everybody was upset about Mueller, is the RICO, is the Racketeering, Influence, and Corrupt Organization Act that I think they will eventually bring. And that will basically, that's what they do for mafia bosses, mafia companies, where even if Trump's fingerprints are not on every little thing, the organization comes back to him. He is the centerpiece of the organization, and they will destroy Donald Trump. The organization will go down, and he will go down. There, I just, you can't do the math and look at it any other way.
I want your thoughts on that, obviously, Neil. But I also want to ask this question. Dan Goldman made this point on the show last week that an indicted company can't borrow money. Who is still loaning this highly leveraged, only mildly successful company money at this point? I mean, how much more damage can be done?
Yeah, I mean, I'm no businessman, but, it sure seems like not exactly, the right kind of person you want to be lending to, even above and beyond the question of whether they are indicted. And I think Dan's point last week, and I think you just heard Donnie echo it, is a good one. Loan agreements often have in them a clause that says that they can call the loans if the lendee is indicted. And so if the organization's indicted, that can happen. And indeed, that New York Times article that you were just showing a moment ago, Nicole, it goes on to say that Trump's own lawyers made that very point to the prosecutors yesterday. Don't indict us because it'll create financial hardship for the company. And so I suspect that's further confirmation of what Donnie said. Now, Dan Goldman has also said something else, which is that, prosecutors need Alan Weisselberg, the CFO, to testify against Trump, that they won't be able to indict Trump without that. And Dan is, the best of prosecutors, and so I ordinarily defer to him. The one cautionary note I'd say here is that Dan is really used to organized crime prosecutions where you have really sophisticated and smart criminals, people who take every precaution not to get caught. And Donald Trump is just not that, whatever he is. Yes, he, doesn't use email and so on, but he's also someone who has such an arrogance and insouciance about the law that I suspect there's going to be more documentary evidence than there is in your standard mafia prosecution.
Well, and Donnie, to that point, he's also not discreet. He doesn't ever try to hide his voracious appetite for corruption, for rigging things in his favor. Let me show you some of the recent interviews with Jennifer Weisselberg and others who are more familiar than I am about what's under the hood at Trump.org.
When Donald says numbers are certain things, and then Alan says numbers are certain things, they're not adding up.
And I actually went through, a situation where I was asked to literally build false financials for my business. I then went into Donald's office, and Donald said, "Did Robert and Harvey talk to you about the numbers?" And I said, "Yes, they did. But let me explain why I can't redo the numbers, because they won't be true." And he just said, "We need new numbers."
So, I mean, if this is what is public facing, Donnie, I imagine investigators and prosecutors who the Supreme Court cleared to literally see everything under the hood, all of the financial records, all of the tax records, all of the accounting records, have a lot more examples than what those two just shared with us.
Yeah, I think it's going to be stunning. Look, even the best real estate companies, if they look under the hood, there's a lot of funky stuff that goes on in real estate, but I'm not damning all real estate companies. Donald Trump was known long before he was president as a complete sleazy businessman. Most legitimate people wouldn't do business with him. Wherever your mind can take you of what somebody would do criminally, he would do. And to your earlier point is just because it's hubris. He's above everything. He's untouchable, and he's entitled to do everything. So, yeah, even the basic things we've seen already, like simple bank fraud and insurance fraud, where he lists an asset valued at one thing on one form and lists it a completely another on a loan form. You go to jail for that. And that's just going to be the tip of the iceberg. I don't think the American public really understands or comprehends the level of criminality that will surface at this organization.
And Neil, even Trump's political allies have always thought that this was excuse the visual here, the soft underbelly of sort of Trump's universe. And I wonder what you think. Should we learn that his company has been indicted this week or charged criminally? What would your questions be about what happens next?
Well, I think you're right about this soft underbelly, and that's why you saw Trump try with every tooth and nail and his allies to go to the Supreme Court and block all of this information from coming out. I think the next set really does turn on have they been able to flip anyone in the organization and what can they reveal? And in particular, how much was Donald Trump directly involved in this as opposed to kind of leaving it and, like an ostrich, burying his head in the sand to avoid knowledge of any ill-becoming activities.